would urge is that Parliament finds a way to progressively achieve the gender rule.
Every other provision has been implemented by a law, except the two-thirds gender rule. And not to say that we have had 4 Duale bills since the last Parliament. We have taken our male colleagues even to dinner, to dance. We have jumped, we have screamed, we have cajoled, we have bembelezed. Nothing has brought us results. If dissolving Parliament is going to bring us the result, then so be it.
Following the advice by the Chief Justice, the President of the Republic of Kenya is duty-bound to dissolve Parliament. The argument that there is no time for the dissolution is inimical to the express expectations of the people of Kenya that the President, as a delegate, will comply with the Constitution of Kenya.
Welcome back to Punchline. A cross-section of leaders reacting, of course, to that advisory by the Chief Justice. We are now joined by Priscilla Nyokabi. She's a commissioner with the National Gender and Equality Commission. Still with us, the Majority Leader in the National Assembly, Dr. Amos Kimunya, and of course, Mbita Member of Parliament, Honorable Millie Odhiambo. We want to kick it off with you, Priscilla, and thanks for joining us. And I want to start by reading for you the reaction of the Speaker of the National Assembly. This is what he had to say. The clamor for the dissolution of the current Parliament on account of failure to enact the two-third gender legislation is at the very least unrealistic, given that legislators decide through voting in Parliament. This would in essence mean that there are an additional 100 votes of nominated women legislators, yet these legislators are not a direct expression of the will of the people. Your thoughts?
I think it's, I'm happy about being in this conversation. But I think what we are seeing is the same old arguments that we had before the 2010 Constitution. And what the 2010 Constitution was supposed to do was to put an end to those arguments, that indeed we should have men and women equal. But because we are not at the equality of men and women in our country, then not more than 2/3 is a constitutional minimum. And we need laws, and if there was any debate around Parliament's role, the Supreme Court Advisory Decision number 2 of 2012 settled that matter. So where we are at now is not to argue about whether we need women in Parliament or not, because we have already passed that stage. We have already enacted a constitution that has that principle. Right. What we now need is to implement that principle. And I agree with Mheshimiwa Kimunya, the Majority Leader. And we are looking forward to seeing Kimunya bills. Remember, we already had the Duale bills, and Duale bills were because Duale was the Majority Leader. And because there is an active bill in the Senate, the Chief Justice has given his decision, and I don't think calling the Chief Justice names is going to help us in this debate. The Chief Justice, like the women of Kenya, got tired of all these arguments. So the Chief Justice saw no political will. So what we need to convince the people of Kenya is that there is political goodwill to enact this matter.
But let me ask you this, Mheshimiwa, about political will and the bill that is currently there. And I know you've previously argued that that is the way to go. But if there was no political will before, Priscilla, why do you imagine that there would be political will now? Is it not an attempt once again to hoodwink Kenyans and to defraud in particular women who are supposed to be the beneficiaries of this legislation, that somehow Parliament will now find within itself, you know, the gravity of the situation? They're more than likely to just reach the same conclusion as always.
Not anymore, not anymore. The road has come to an end. We are at the end of the road. We are at the end of the tether. And what happens is what Millie said. The option the president now has is an option of time. It's not an option of dissolving Parliament or not. What he has is an option of time. And I think that he should give Parliament one last opportunity between October and December, when the House goes on recess, and between October and December, we want to see the effort we saw on the formula. Because remember, this country has a difficult question. 370 billion is now going into devolution. We are not the only chapter that needed to be implemented in the Constitution that was expensive, that was, laborious, that was going to, cause a lot of changes in the society. Devolution caused a lot of changes in society. Governors, deputy governors, county assemblies, members of, county executive, all that has been done. And, implementing 2/3 gender rule is just about 200 million Kenya shillings per year to implement. Senate needs 2 more women. The National Assembly, if you apply the formula with 290, you need 21 women. If you apply the formula with 349, you need 41 women. And you don't even need them now. Remember the Mutula bill? proposes that the implementation is in the next election. When the law passes now, you implement in the 2022 election. And this last opportunity that the president has with the timeline is between October and December. Give Parliament one last chance. I'm happy our majority leader is now Kimunya and can also consider whether to bring in a bill at the same time as Senate is considering, or allow Senate to finish its bill and then bring it on to the National Assembly, whip the members, parliamentary group meetings. Let us get a solution to these matters so that in December the president can say, I no longer need to dissolve Parliament because the law has been enacted. But if we continue the way we are, I'm just from another show where the men were even arguing, women of Mashinani, I don't know, women of where, women this way, that way. That is not going to help us. We have an active bill. Let that active bill be enacted in the timeline that is reasonable, as the way the Law Society chairman is saying. The president must apply the reasonable time test in a reasonable time. If that matter is resolved, then we are able to move forward as a country, because men and women, Keguta, we've been in this discussion, is a twin engine.
Right.
The right engine and the left engine must both work.
That's true.
It can't be a bull dance, as it has been. It cannot be a dance of jogos. Messing up our country. It must be a dance of jogo, and in Kikuyu land we say na moera, jogo na moera.
Oh my goodness. But at least today we've sandwiched the gentleman quite squarely. Honorable Kimunya, is there commitment from you? I just want to pick up from where Priscilla has left. Is there commitment from you to back the bill that is in the House? I mean, are you going to be rallying members, or what really is the core of your argument that the Chief Justice didn't play nice?
Actually, the fact of the matter is that the bill that is now in the Senate is actually a bill that has been processed through the National Assembly. It was a bill that was initiated in the National Assembly to actualize the provisions of Article 100, which basically says that Parliament shall enact legislation to promote the representation in Parliament of women, persons with disabilities, youth, ethnic and other minorities and marginalized communities. And it's important we put this into context, that Article 27(8) basically says the state, right? The state shall take legislative and other measures to implement the principle that no more than 2/3 of members of the elective, appointing bodies shall be of the same gender. Article 81(b) then talks of the electoral system shall comply with one of the principles being that no more than 2/3 of the members of the elected public bodies shall be the same gender. Now, those two capture the principles. It doesn't attenuate in any of them obligate Parliament to do anything. But when you now come to Article 100...
But who passes bills?
No, when you now come to Article 100, it's very clear that Parliament shall enact legislation to promote the representation of women. And this is the only article that is also contained within the 5th schedule. So the framers of the Constitution went through with a toolkit to identify which are these critical laws that need to be passed and within a certain time frame. And there's 48 of them. And they're all scheduled within Schedule 5. Article 100 is the only one scheduled. There's no mention of Article 81. There's no mention of Article 27, because these were basically saying these are the broad principles. But Parliament will enact a law under Article 100 to promote the representation. Now, we have gone ahead as a National Assembly, and we have passed that law, and have passed it on to the Senate to consider, because, of course, like I said earlier, that law also will involve counties. Now, I can't control Senate. They have taken 1 year and how many months to just agree on a simple formula. So I don't know how long it will take. I'm in constant touch with my colleague, the leader of majority in the Senate, so we can accelerate some of this legislation. But the point I was making earlier is that the Chief Justice knew of this bill, which the 12th Parliament has started because they now want to behave like the 11th Parliament, has already taken that even before we were told by the Chief Justice. We did it on our own. But knows about it, even has a copy. And I would have expected him, even as part of the public participation, to come back to the Speaker and say, you've given me this copy of this bill, but I don't think it will answer the issues that the petitioner is asking for.
All right.
But instead of that...
Let me hold you there. Let me hold you there, Majority Leader, because we're on a time program and running out of time. I want to bring in Honorable Millie Odhiambo. Millie, and I'm sure you may want to respond on a thing or two you've heard, but just to advance the conversation, Lawyer Kamotho Waiganjo has recently posed this question in terms of an opinion opinion piece on the implications of dissolving parliament, and he says, quote, there is IEBC whose status is at best abysmal. Would anyone risk an election with Chebukati's team at the helm? Is that, do you think, a legitimate concern that, you know, if the president was to go ahead and, you know, take this advisory opinion, maybe not even wait those 21 days, do it tomorrow or whenever, you know, that who would run a fresh poll?
Exactly.
Honorable Millie?
I think she's muted.
Okay, it seems that you may have lost your sound. I'll just give you another opportunity, Honorable Millie. It seems your mic is muted, ma'am. It seems your mic is muted on your end. I'll come back to Honorable Millie shortly, but maybe I can take you up, Priscilla, on that. I mean, if push comes to shove, this bill that you're, you know, is a wish and a prayer for you does not sail through, who would run a fresh poll? And while we're at it, where would that leave BBI?
You know, what happens with constitutional obligations, you can never answer it with logistical nightmare. So it's true that there will be a logistical nightmare with the IBC, but that is not an answer to the two-thirds gender debate. So each debate on its own merits. But I just want to make a difference between the two bills that Mheshimiwa Kimunya is speaking about and the bill that we are seeking. The Article 100 bill sort of does not give you space. So if you don't have space in Article 97 and Article 98, Article 100 will not open up the space that we need in Articles 97 and 98. So the bill we actually need the houses to pursue is the Senator Mutula and Fatia bill, the one that imports Article 177, the one that we use for MCAs in Articles 97 and 98. And if there is a question on the role of Parliament, the Supreme Court answered this already in 2012 in the advisory case number 2 of 2012, that Parliament had up to 5 years using the Article 100 law, but now giving space in Articles 97 and 98, which means amendments to the Constitution, for us to then be able to implement the two-thirds gender rule in National Assembly and Senate. And so there is no doubt that Parliament has a role. There is no doubt that a law ought to have been passed within the timelines of the Constitution, as he mentioned before. But there is also now a sword of Damocles hanging over Parliament's head in the sense of the CJ's recommendation.
Right.
So if they had time before, not anymore. Now they need to act with a little bit of haste. And we want to see sensitivity on this matter. The women of our country matter. The having men and women in leadership matters. We can see that with countries where women are in leadership. It matters in our country. Let us not have insensitive debates, you know, making it sound like women are asking for too much, women are asking for free things. That is not the case at all. We are only asking for what the Constitution has already given, and we are asking for sensitivity and leadership in implementing this matter, as has happened in Rwanda, as has happened in Tanzania, as has happened in Uganda. We are not the African country with the strongest traditions. Even those are traditional African countries. And African Union itself has a Maputo protocol on the rights of women. So, you know, we have begged, I feel like Gladys, we have begged, we have cajoled. Can we now have the Constitution implemented?
All right, Honorable Millie, I believe you're back with us, and I hope you can hear us. Ma'am, your views on what you've heard so far.
Yeah.
I hope you can hear me now.
Absolutely.
Yes, I just wanted to say that if you are talking about IEBC not getting ready, and yet they're actually preparing to conduct several by-elections, does it then mean that all the by-elections that are going to take place are not effective? What I'd want to say is that as those who are proposing inclusion of both men and women, I think there is a way that we can work out on over this issue, and we shouldn't take hardline stance. If we followed the law strictly, then I would actually say that the Chief Justice is right in the position that is taken. And in my interpretation, I would say that because, you know, lawyers are free to, you know, give their own valid interpretation, then I would say that the Chief Justice actually did the right thing. But to move the country forward, it's not about what is right or wrong, especially when we are talking about groups that are either marginalized for years or vulnerable groups. Indeed, if you actually look at the point at which we came up with the number for 47 women, it wasn't anything mathematical. It was basically to move the country forward. And the women agreed to lose 90 seats that had been set aside, which would have been easy now, but it was to move the country forward. And those 90 seats is actually what was added to the single constituencies that has brought us to 290. If you look at very recently when there was an impasse in the revenue sharing formula in the Senate, they did not come up with a scientific or mathematical formula. They came up with a political formula that was able to help the country move forward. I would want to encourage the president in the same manner that he actually helped in solving that impasse in relation to the revenue allocation, that he needs to look for a win-win situation that would enable the women move forward and yet at the same time deal with the realities that we are facing as a country. It's not a competition between men and women. It's not a gender war. It is actually about inclusion. And inclusion acknowledges that women have been left out for years. If you were to go into legal interpretation and you read actually some of the things that, I see our lawyers are really struggling, very hard to interpret and justify. But really, we are the ones who passed the Constitution as it is.
Right.
And that's why we are struggling so hard. We go back to Article 100 of the marginalized, which actually is not what Article 27 is also talking about. And so, what I would urge is that as leaders, led by the president, we need to find a win-win situation for the country, not through court, not through acrimonious processes of the court. And I think that for me would be the best way to work around it.
Yeah, and I know Honorable Priscilla has proposed, at least I've heard on this program, that up until, I believe December is what she said, and give Parliament a chance to pass this piece of legislation that is before then. But I want to stay with you, Millie, and I want to read out a quote, and I'll get feedback from all of you, but I'll start with you, Millie, by Honorable Martha Karua on the same. She's a NARC Kenya party leader. She said, quote, "The primary responsibility is on President Kenyatta to comply with his constitutional obligation. He must dissolve Parliament. Failure to do so will amount to reinforcing the impunity already demonstrated by Parliament. It would be condemning the country to a state of lawlessness and anarchy. Failure to abide by the advisory would result in irreparable harm to his legacy and plunge the country into further uncertainty." And I want to leave it there and bring in the question of legitimacy and start with you, Honorable Millie Odhiambo, because not too long ago, I mean, ODM was on the polar, side of Jubilee and often questioned the legitimacy of President Kenyatta's government. But that is water under the bridge with a handshake in place. But here we go again with another moment in our history that some opine could be a test for not just the legitimacy of Parliament after a reasonable time period, but possibly the legitimacy of President Kenyatta's government. Do you see that as a major cause of concern for the executive, and how exactly would legitimacy of the executive and Parliament be threatened if this matter is not dealt with expeditiously?
You lost her again.
Honorable Millie? Oh no, we seem to have lost Mheshimiwa San again. I'll come to you. But Amos, perhaps I'll start with you, Majority Leader then. Are you concerned about legitimacy?
Yeah, yes, as far as I'm concerned, Parliament is as legitimate as it can be. Until the matters are exhausted in court, and I'm sure this week we'll be going to court as Parliament. There are people who have already gone to court. There is, like I said, there's already two cases, case number 390, petition number 397 and petition number 401, whose hearing starts on 7th of October. And the sad thing is obviously that, like I said, the Chief Justice knowing about this, the matter being canvassed in that was the Mativo order directed at the 11th Parliament. But even before the court pronounced itself based on that, the petition that are already in court, the Chief Justice at paragraph 23 goes ahead and decides to say that the obligation under 265 to enact the legislation were directed to Parliament as an institution and not to the 11th Parliament. So he's already giving a decision before the court has decided. Now, is that how law, I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but surely I don't expect the Chief Justice to preempt what the courts, the High Court, will do by giving an opinion on a matter that is active in court. So if there's a matter that's illegitimate, is the advice that is being given by the Chief Justice. Parliament is legitimate, we will continue doing its bit, and we will continue summoning the Chief Justice to appear before the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee to render an account, to tell us why he doesn't want to resign, to tell us why he wants to create chaos within the Supreme Court just before he leaves, and why he wants to cause chaos across the entire country. And we are not going to allow ourselves to be intimidated with some fictitious and advisories that have no legal grounding.
Honorable Nyokabi, yeah? I'm sure you're itching to respond to that.
It is true, because we don't want to lose the sense of all this debate, and the sense is the two-thirds gender rule.
Yes.
It is indeed true that we are in a round of legalities. And Millie says it correctly, that it is not the legalities that will help us. It is actually a sort of more concerted effort at finding a solution to this matter. And the solution lies in addressing the issues in the two-thirds. So it's true, we have to go into a round of legalities and into a round of interpretations. But as we go into the round of legalities and interpretations, can we also keep alive the matter that has caused this problem in the first place, which is the two-thirds gender rule? So what we are hoping to see is the president now, because honestly speaking, in the round of legalities, Parliament has also done its part. Now the ball is not in Parliament's court anymore. Actually, the ball now is in the president's court. And we are hoping that just as the way the revenue was difficult for the country, and a solution was found to the revenue debate, that putting all the minds together, putting all the actors together, that we will find a solution to this matter, and a solution that helps us to address the two-thirds matter. So I think what the Chief Justice's advisory has done is to put this matter where it belongs rightfully.
But I want you to talk about legitimate and illegitimate, Honorable Nyokabi. No, hold on, Honorable Kimunya. Hold on. No, sir, hold on, Honorable Kimunya. Honorable Nyokabi, I just want to talk about the legitimacy question, because what Amos Kimunya, Daktari, is trying to tell this program is that Parliament, as it sits, is sitting constitutionally, is sitting legitimately, and so you're seeming almost to just stop short of suggesting that anything that would send you home, because you've called this a fictitious advisory, that you would sort of sit in place, hold fort, refuse to go home if you're told to go home?
If the Chief Justice is the lawyers who are purporting that Parliament is illegal, right? Now, who confirmed the Chief Justice? It's the same Parliament, the 11th Parliament. Did it have a two-thirds gender majority? It didn't. So if he was put in office himself by an unlawful Parliament, then he's in office unlawfully. Right? and hence, I mean, we can go on and on in terms of these things. But what I want people to understand here, if perchance, and I know the president is more responsible than people would want to believe, if he was to be convinced to dissolve Parliament today, Article 261(8) would kick in. And I'll say, fine, go out there for an election, and the new Parliament that will be elected will have 5 years to enact this law. So we have a bill in the Senate that we are processing. Would you want to dissolve Parliament now, bring in another Parliament, and then give it 5 years to enact the same law? And who even tells you at the end of 5 years they will have enacted this law? So what are we actually gaining? And these are the questions we need to ask ourselves, so that we are not basically burning a house just because there's a rat's infestation, right? There are better ways of doing things. If the Chief Justice had come back to the Speaker and said that, look, I'm aware there's this court case coming, there's pressure, can you people accelerate the process of getting this rule, this gender rule enacted before the next general election? That's a fair thing. I mean, none of us is challenging the fact that it was provided for by the Kenyan people that there should be a two-thirds parity. Gender parity was a negotiated thing in Bomas. Right. And we are not there. Certainly, I'm not there. Okay. But what we want to know is what is the best way of ensuring that that is done. First of all, let's do the Article 100 legislation. which we are required by the Constitution to do anyway. The next thing is, let's start looking at, because of the contradictions within the Constitution itself, there are so many things that need to be tidied up within a constitutional review. A number of those things involve changing the composition of Parliament, which is a referendum issue. Whatever we do in Parliament will then need to be a referendum.
You're saying BBI will save the day?
Now, we already have an initiative.
I'll come to you on that. I was teasing you because I need to bring in Honorable Millie. I must.
It's not just about the BBI.
Millie, I know you're dropping your call all the time, so I'm just going to try and get you in and sort of run roughshod on the majority leader. Millie, can you hear us now? And let me let you contribute before we wind up the show.
I mean, I can...
We are losing her again.
Oh, no. All right. I think that would have to have been our final shot with Millie Odhiambo, Mbita Member of Parliament. But we're most grateful to you, ma'am, for joining us. Okay, the General Commissioner wants to speak on her behalf. I think we'll just keep that link in case we're able to get it. Go ahead, Priscilla.
No, just on the question of legitimacy, I think that Parliament is going to be legitimate until a time when the decisions have then been rendered, because that question of legitimacy now also has to go to court. Remember, there is a stay order on the President doing the dissolution of the House following that decision. Right. But I think because we have been here as a country, let us just go to the solution. And I like what the majority leader is saying. The solution is the 2/3. The matter was negotiated in Bomas. The matter was put in the Constitution. The 11th Parliament did not manage to pass the law. The 12th Parliament should now pass the law. So let us get ourselves into a solution mode, as opposed to fighting the Chief Justice. The Chief Justice had to do what he had to do because the Constitution allowed him to do that. And you know, given, for me, I'm getting very worried with the debate we are now having, because the President also really pushed to a corner. We'll have no choice but to dissolve the House. And instead of the President dissolving the House, isn't it better to use the time between now, October, November, December, finding a solution to the 2/3 gender rule? And I personally think that it is possible. There is a bill in Senate, Senator Mutula and Senator Fartia, on the same Duale, is the same version as the Duale 1 and Duale 2. So that particular bill needs to be fast-tracked, so that when we now come here, we are saying there might be no need for the President to dissolve Parliament, because Parliament has atoned for its sins, because Parliament has wronged the women of Kenya for the last 10 years. But there is no, you know, a good deed can be done even on the 10th year. So let them now do the good deed in the 10th year. We say that this matter has been resolved. And when we go to the 2022 election, we will now be sure that men and women will be in the right composition in the National Assembly and the Senate. But you are right on the BBI. It is indeed true that there were many proposals of solving these problems in the BBI. So an even better process, you know, nominations are also very faulted. A much stronger process of election of men and women is actually coming within the BBI process. So one other phase of solution is BBI. But the fear for us with BBI is that there are no timelines. What actually you can put a timeline on is a mature bill, like what you now have in Senator Fartia's bill. So let's get the mature bill, resolve the 2/3 matter, get the legitimacy of Parliament back, kill the dissolution matter, and then now come on to BBI as men and women. Because now, if we go to BBI, we will then go to BBI in a wrong state of affairs, because one gender has aggrieved the other gender.
Yeah, but I think there's something else we need to also look at. You know, lawmaking is not as straightforward, like saying between October and December pass the following laws. Like I said, laws to do with the Constitution will require a referendum, whether we go the BBI route or a parliamentary route.
Article 97, 98, that matter has been canvassed. There is no referendum on that.
It's not just Article 97, 98. There's Article 38.3 that also, there are so many articles that are interconnected on this matter. We've looked through it. Some will require a referendum. Now, how do we even go to a referendum before we have a referendum bill, right? Before we have a referendum act? A law that will regulate.
But this is a false argument you're advancing.
So what I'm basically saying...
This is a false argument. What about the implementation of the not more than 2/3 would require a referendum? We already went to a referendum on the matter, which is why we ended up with that particular law.
No, we went to a referendum on a negotiated constitution.
Yes.
That constitution contained within itself some contradictions. Right?
They are not contradictions.
No, I'm not a lawyer, but I've been given all these contradictions that we need to kind of amend so that we can have a seamless kind of operation of this 2/3 gender rule. But So what we are doing as Parliament is we are already saying, let's start with Article 100, yeah, to promote the representation. We are also processing right now through the two committees the referendum law. Then we move in stages, so that whether it's through BBI or through any other initiative that we need to take to the people, it's up to the people of Kenya to determine, A, do we still want this gender parity? If they still, which of course we have not seen any indication that they don't want it, are they willing to then top up Parliament to become, instead of 290 or 349, that the new Parliament will be 449? Now, it's up to the people to make that decision. And if they make that decision willingly, and they are willing to pay for it, so be it. Us as Parliament, we pass the law, right? Then how do you ensure these extra 100 women are not just left to a few party bosses to nominate, right? Which was the fear that most people had. And that's how even the 47 women ended up being told, we are giving you 47 women not to be nominated, but to be kind of campaigned for by the women themselves within the counties. So that you don't end up people just picking their girlfriends or friends and nominating them to Parliament. So we will still need to figure out, even if you had to add these top-up numbers, how do we ensure that these top-up numbers are competitively canvassed for by the women themselves, so that it's not people being placed there to serve the interests of a few people.
I think everyone can agree with your latter argument, Honorable Kimunya, that even within the women's fraternity, they do want to see those seats going to women. But what you cannot argue on this program and advance as truth is that there is something about the not more than 2/3, which was not already subjected to a referendum and was in fact found to be the will of the people.
No, it was subjected. No, I agree totally. I was in Bomas and it was agreed. It was taken to. But what I was saying, what we are seeing now, in terms of the discussions even during the BBI, is people saying, the example from the Article 177, in terms of what was happening in the county governments, the gender top-ups in the county assemblies has ended up being now people becoming appendages of the governors. So because they are not answerable to the people, they are now being used by the governors to fight proper governance through diluting the oversight by the elected MCAs. And you don't want a situation like this to happen, and that's why I would like to see, let's get a law. Let's increase the number of women or the number of men. It could go either way. I'm not worried about that, but the top-up numbers must come in such a way that this will not promote abuse of that system as we try to bring parity. Right?
Honorable Nyokabi, how would you propose that is dealt with?
That's a conversation we need to be having, how to do it in the best way possible. But in the meantime, let's do what we are obligated to do, which is Article 100. The other one is not just for Parliament. It's a state to take those measures. And Parliament is only a part of the state.
Let me just get in very quickly there, because it is indeed true that there are many arguments and weaknesses around the nomination process that have got to be dealt with, and that everybody admits, that indeed we have to rethink the nomination process. And in fact, just as we spoke about earlier, the BBI process does address some of those concerns. But what is not true is that you cannot now resolve Article 97 and 98 until we go to a referendum. That is not true. You can resolve Article 97 and 98 without any referendum. That debate has been had before. Duale 1, 2, 3, and 4 have been in the process without any need for a referendum. So let's solve one problem at a time. So the problem we now have is a problem of space and numbers. So once we resolve the problem of space and numbers in Article 97 and 98, we can then resolve the question of quality and even the question of the nomination process. But let us not do what the majority is saying. Unless we first agree on the nomination process before we resolve what is a constitutional crisis that we are now facing because of the CJ's decision. The CJ's decision is just about Article 97 and 98. Pass that law. That law will not even get implemented now. It gets implemented in the next election. So you have enough time to resolve the nomination process. And indeed, the nomination process must be resolved. Because again, even for us women, we are alive to the quality of representation that we are bringing onto the House. We want to see women taking charge of Article 43 matters, health, education, water, food, sort of those societal issues, and getting resolutions around them. But that is a second level debate. The main debate now is 97 and 98, getting the law that is required for that. And that, for me, we can get a clinical precise period because the bill is mature. The Senator for Tia, Senator Mutula bill is mature. So if it just House business puts it on the order paper, The members know that if the president does not get this bill passed, he will order dissolution, so then they have to pass this law. And it didn't need to come to this. It could have been resolved earlier, but now that it has come to this, let us deal with it in the way that it has come and just make sure that in the shortest time possible, reasonable time test, that we get this law passed. And then the other questions remain. Nomination processes, electoral processes. We actually need to go into an electoral process that produces men and women, and you don't need excess numbers of the National Assembly and the Senate. Yeah. We need to have reasonable numbers in view of our population, in view of the resources of our country. But for those arguments, we don't want them to be made when women are outside. Let women come in and we make those decisions
and then talk about it. You know, Honorable Kimunya, I really, I feel for you this evening, sir, because not only had I sandwiched you between some of the toughest legislators, former NAR commissioner, but also I've had to cut you short quite a few times on the program, but simply because we're out of time, not because you're a man, I promise, I promise.
I know, you know.
I've been teasing him all week to pack his bags.
Against 3, against 4.
Even the referee is a player.
Now you can see what will be going on in Parliament.
Oh, we feel so sorry.
And let it, we still want to see Kimunya's hand in the enactment of the law.
I know.
We are not done with him yet. I know. Until he whips the numbers.
But I think the most important thing, and I think we all agree, we need to ensure we have the law to actualize the entire constitution. But by dissolving Parliament, we will not get that law. We will not get it now, and we will not get it in the next 5 years. Okay? We are just postponing the problem for another 5 or even 6 years. Yeah? And if the next Parliament does not enact it, they will be dissolved, and then the new one will be given another 5 years. Okay. So we will actually be giving to the people who don't want that law to be passed.
I think the Chief Justice said we can feel a little pain.
And that's what the Chief Justice should have thought of.
A little pain. Pack your bags, Honorable Kimunya.
No, it's the Chief Justice who is packing his bags. We want him to go on leave.
Go back to Kipipiri.
We want him to go on terminal leave so that he stops making these kind of very erratic decisions at the tail end of his term.
All right, I'm just teasing you.
But just a quick warning on parliamentarians.
He could leave. He could plunge the country into chaos.
There are more orders where this one came from.
Okay.
So I think we need to
Honorable Kimunya, we're out of time. I'm just teasing you about packing your bags. Not such a bad idea, though. All right. That's our time. Thanks to all our guests and to Honorable Millie Odhiambo. We apologize. The quality of our link was just not good enough. But we thank her as well for her views and her time. You can catch us online. Use the hashtag Punchline. We'll have this whole conversation online for you on YouTube. Great to be back. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye. God bless.